Hey everyone, it's Enryu here and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're going to talk about the most frequently asked questions about Nilah, and these include why I never go Ravenous Hydra on the champion, why I max E over Q now, as well as Enchanters versus Engage supports for Nilah. First and foremost, I want to talk about the most popular build, which is currently Ravenous Hydra into Shield Bow. This build is basically just a lifesteal build. I'm going to compare it to the lethality build that I go, and I'll tell you why I prefer the lethality build over the lifesteal build. I'm just going to put the item description and stats on the screen. Primarily, I want to compare the 2-item spike for both builds. And now when we compare the differences, you'll see that the AD is generally the same thing, which is 140 from the lifesteal build and 135 from the lethality build. If you choose to build 2 longswords with the extra gold, that would even out the gold cost. So basically at 6800 gold, the AD that you get, the ability haste, the crit chance, it's basically the same. There's no big difference between the two. But in the lethality build, the big difference maker is getting 35 lethality. So obviously, if you are comparing these two, the lifesteal build is much more defensive. It does a lot less damage. And the Prowler's build, on the other hand, is focusing more on damage and snowballing. So my reasoning for going to the lethality build is because I think that it is much more effective. It scales a lot better. But if you think about it this way, you do 100 damage per hit. With 17% lifesteal, you're only going to heal 17. So I would much rather do like 150 per hit or like 200 per hit, and I would rather not heal at all. But this is just my opinion and my playstyle. An ADC that has the ability to carry team fights through AoE damage, I don't think that she's really suited for these long fights where you lifesteal back up, you chase people. I just don't think that's what the champion does. You're really not going to kill a tank with Ravenous Hydra and Shield Bow. And the way that I see Nilah as a champion is she is best suited as an ADC assassin. She has burst damage, and when she has enough items, she has damage to burst down even tanks. And people generally aren't just going to let you chase them down with your Qs and autos. They're going to CC you, they're going to run away. It's better to just keep the fights short. So this brings me to the item that I think you should build in every single Nilah build, which is LDR. But it just is the most effective when you're going lethality with the armor penetration. Because how these two stats interact in League of Legends is that armor penetration will apply first, then lethality. So basically at 3 items with Collector, Prowler's Claw, and LDR, you're gonna have 40 lethality and 39% armor penetration. And what this means is that if someone has 100 armor, you're basically taking away 39% of that 100, then you're subtracting another 40 flat armor, which leaves them with 21 armor. At that point, you're basically doing almost true damage to them because they're only reducing like 10% of your physical damage from armor instead of maybe like 30 or 40%. You're doing a lot more damage. So basically what this means is that we are taking away a lot of armor from tanks and bruisers, allowing us to do a lot more damage to them, as well as utilizing the Giant Slayer passive. While for squishy targets, this means that we're basically removing their armor stat entirely. And then I want to talk about Bloodthirster as an item, which I think fulfills the job of Ravenous Hydra and Shield Bow. Because if the whole point of the lifesteal build is to survive longer, I think that Bloodthirster as an item actually outperforms both those items, Shield Bow and Ravenous Hydra, because of the innate lifesteal that the item has, right? Bloodthirster is 200 gold cheaper than Ravenous and Shield Bow, but it gives 15% lifesteal. Plus, it gives a passive shield that you can use anytime. As long as you hit someone, you can have that shield. You don't have to wait for 90 seconds on the cooldown. And because of that, we can basically just not build any other lifesteal items. Just this one is enough. But in most of my games, I tend to not really need lifesteal at all. And because the way I play, I don't really feel like I need lifesteal in my fights. It's either I go in and I kill them all, or I get one shot. However, because of this build, it tends to be me one-shotting the enemy team more often than not. and this basically concludes why I prefer the lethality build over Ravenous Hydra. Ravenous Hydra doesn't really scale as an item. Every time you die you lose stacks, so it's kind of not a reliable item. But everyone's playstyle is different. Definitely try both playstyles, see which one you prefer more. Just give it a chance, and if you don't like it, then it is what it is. So now I'm going to move on to the second frequently most asked question, which is a recent tech that I started doing on Nilah, which is Emax over Qmax. And so I've been testing for about 2 weeks now on my Challenger account as well as my Smurf accounts. So what you need to know about Nilah's abilities is that Nilah's Q's cooldown will always stay the same regardless of the ability rank. It always has a base cooldown of 4 seconds, and it only gains 5 damage per rank up, as well as 7.5% extra AD scaling. So in the early game, we're actually not going to see a big jump in damage if we max it. Every time we max, we put a level in it, we probably get like 10 damage on her Q every 4 seconds. However, Nilah's E ability, the more you rank it up, the cooldown changes as well as the damage. Every time you rank it up, it reduces the E cooldown by a few seconds. At max rank, it goes from 26 seconds to 12 seconds, which is a huge decrease in cooldowns, especially since you can have 2 charges. So maxing Nilah's E ability instead of Q is actually much more useful for us, because we don't lose any damage at all. In fact, we do more damage per combo because our E does more damage. We're going to have lower cooldown on the dash, which means we can get back to lane faster. We have more opportunities to go in and then get out. But I will say that the only games where I would still max Q are if I am just really fed in the early game, and I think that the value I get from Q max, the AD scaling, is more than the E damage, which is quite rare because not every game you're going to start off with like 5 kills. But if you do, definitely still go Q max so that you have more AD scaling on it. And so now I'm going to move on to the third question of Enchanters versus Engage supports on Nilah. I think that people have a really big misconception when it comes to Enchanters, because they think that Nilah's passive makes it so that she's only good with Enchanters, or like she's a god with Enchanters, but that's actually not the case. So the actual part of the passive that makes people think Nilah is really good with Enchanters is the healing or shielding. But this healing and shielding is actually not that big. It's only 7.5% healing and 15% shielding. So basically, when you think about it, it's just every time you get 100 health, right? You recover extra 7.5, so you get 107.5 instead. Or if you get 100 shield, then it's 115. So while this healing and shielding amount is quite nice to have, it doesn't make Nilah extremely broken with Enchanters. It just makes it so that Nilah has some kind of synergy with Enchanters. But Nilah as a champion, the rest of her kit, besides the healing and shielding passive, it works so well with engage supports. And the reason being that Nilah actually doesn't want to be the first person to engage, even though she has an engage ultimate. It's kind of similar to a Diana ult. But the big difference is Nilah wants to be someone who collects champions in a fight. She wants to make sure that there's someone to CC the enemy so that she could go in after and just clean up. When we talk about Nilah as a champion, she doesn't actually have a guaranteed way to enter team fights because her dashes are short, and even with prowlers you would have to have a target to E on before you can use prowlers. And typically in the mid to late game, if a Nilah is this close to your team and she's the only one trying to do so, you can just one-shot her or just CC her, which makes Nilah really great as a secondary engage. Obviously, there are some games where if you see an opportunity to win a game, you have to be the first one to go in and one-shot them all, right, with the lethality build. But in most games, it is actually a lot better to just observe a fight first and then clean up by going in on their primary targets or playing front to back with LDR on tanks. So that is why engage supports, specifically hook supports, are so good for Nilah, because hook supports in lane, they have so much pressure, and because they are able to use hooks to close the distance between Nilah and the enemy, Nilah can actually save a dash for herself. She doesn't have to use it on a minion, she doesn't have to use it as a gap closer. She can fully use her dash as a way to auto reset and a way to deal damage. And you know, the more damage you have that you can use on the enemy carry or whoever that the engaged support hooks in lane, the bigger the chance that you will end up having a kill. Which basically means that if you're playing with an enchanter, more likely than not, you are just AFKing the lane. However, if you play with an engaged support, you have much more freedom in the lane. Hook supports, specifically champions like Pyke, Nautilus, they just provide so much more opportunity in the game for you to snowball, and it makes your life a lot easier. And also another thing is, even when you fight with an enchanter, more likely than not, the enemy will just be focusing you first instead of the enchanter, because Nilah is close range, right? So she's definitely going to be hit first. And instead of having two people focus you, if you have an engaged support to engage for you, you're kind of just sharing the damage, because they will have to hit your support first because they're the first one to go in, and you know, they have to switch to Nilah after Nilah goes in. And splitting this damage actually nets you a lot more chances when you're skirmishing or just fighting 2v2. And that's it for now. These are the 3 most commonly asked questions that I really have not answered in my videos yet. If there are more questions, I will probably make another video talking about these things, or maybe just a channel on my Discord channel specifically talking about the most frequently asked questions. If you made it this far, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope maybe I cleared up a thing or two regarding certain aspects of playing the champion, and I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.